Justin, if we haven't had the chance to meet yet, I know there are a few new people here tonight. I get the privilege of being the student director here. I'm so glad to see y'all. I hope y'all are glad to see each other. We had an awesome time this weekend at Fall Retreat. If you were there, I think my favorite moment was the part where Miles comes up to me Friday night. Friday night, he's like, "Hey, I really want to do the polar plunge. I packed swim trunks and did not know that there was no water here." And I was like, and we have a creek. There's a creek, but the pool was like closed, the tubing was closed, all that kind of stuff. And I was like, I mean, I guess, but you should wait till Saturday night when it's really cold. He was like, yeah, okay. So that might be my favorite part is like that Saturday night, we're at the snack shack, and I'm sitting chatting with some people, and one of the staffers there, and we look out at the creek, and there's like 18 people surrounding this creek, and Miles is shirtless in his swim trunks, and he's just like, I'm gonna do it! And he dabs a foot, and he goes, it's really cold! It was so funny. So, y'all should come to Fall Retreat next year. That way you can witness Miles do things that defy common sense. Which is just the life of a middle school boy, let's be real. So, what? I have common sense? Some people. But hey, we're in week 3 of Fear Not. So turn to your neighbor on your left and say, hey, fear not.
Hey, fear not. Fear not.
Turn to your other neighbor on your right hand side and say, hey, faith over fear.
Faith over fear.
Nice. All right, we're following through. That's right. What? Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. So this is week 3. So in week one, we learned that when circumstances are fearful, or they cause us to fear, or they are difficult, that God is inviting us to trust Him in the middle of them. And then in week 2, so last week, we examined the prophet Elijah and ran through a whole lot of scripture and essentially learned that when people begin to speak fear at us, we need to run and get into His presence. And initially, this week, I was like, when I wrote some curriculum out, like I had an outline and a plan for this month, I was like, we're going to talk about Gideon. And then I got into Gideon, and I got into Judges, and I was like, this dude's got 2 whole chapters dedicated to him. I'm like, I don't know if I got the wherewithal to do that. And I started thinking over it and praying over it, and I actually was at Fall Retreat that I just felt like God was saying, now's not the time. Gideon's good, but now's not the time. A lot of his stuff, his fear came from a sense of identity, and I think that can be better summed up in a different series altogether. And so I'm thinking, all right, well, God, we got Wednesday night. Like, what do I do? And it's funny. The whole weekend was about 2 Peter. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about Peter. And like I told you guys last week, Elijah and Peter are my guys. Not because of how awesome they are, but because of the dumb stuff they do. And I'm like, that's me. I'm dumb. I let people get in my head, and I make stupid decisions, and God still uses them. So somebody's shouting out affirmations. I love it. As I went to prepare for this, the narrative that we're going to talk about tonight, the account, is when Peter and Jesus walk on the water. And I'm really excited. We're going to get to that. As I was preparing, I pulled out a Bible that I don't usually pull out. It's not the one that's up here. When I got married, on the day of my wedding, my grandpa pulled me aside, and he hands me one of his Bibles. And I was like, man, I was like weeping. He had like a note written in there. He's like, hey, I had to type this because every time I tried to write it, I started crying and like it's got all the paper and like the ink was running. He's like, so I typed it in print. I was like, that's so awesome. And as I flipped through that Bible, man, my grandpa he's not dead. He's still around. I don't know why I say he is a man of faith. He is a man that I definitely look up to. He's been married to his wife for like 52 years or something like that. They're going strong. He loves Jesus. He supports ministry. He loves the church. And he actually was a youth pastor a long time ago. And in his Bible, he's got all these notes. And I'm sitting there going, man, I wonder what my grandpa wrote about this passage. Like, I just really want to know what he wrote about this passage. And I start scrolling. I'm going through the Gospel of Matthew. And I'm like seeing all this stuff where he's like tattooed the pages. I'm like, all right. And I get this passage and there's like 3 phrases. I'm like, oh, that's it. Peter walks on water and you got 3 phrases. But they're actually really powerful. And so if you're taking notes, if you're a note taker, I want to use his words to kind of title tonight. And it's simply this. The two phrases that I want to latch on to is this. Fabulous faith, dangerous doubt. Fabulous faith, dangerous doubt. So here's a few notes that I wrote down as I was processing those words that he left. Number one is this: fear is fought with faith and fed by doubt. Fear is fought with faith and it's fed by doubt. When we have faith, we have trust. When we're trusting in something, we're not as often scared about something else, whether it's situation, people, circumstances, the future. But when we start doubting, and doubt is a lack of trust, we begin to feed our fear. We're just heaping coals on the fire, and it leaves us frozen. The two cannot happen simultaneously, and both flow from our focus. Both flow from where our eyes are. What are you focused on? And that's what brings us to Peter and Jesus. So if you have a copy of the Word with you, we're going to be found in Matthew 14, 22 through 33. And we're going to work through this together. So starting in verse 22, immediately, you should circle that, by the way. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. So for context, what happened in the verses prior is one of Jesus' most famous miracles. It's the one where he's teaching to this massive crowd, and there's we say the 5,000 people, but if you do all the actual math, in ancient times they would only count the men. Well, men usually were married and had kids, so they bring those people with them. And then you do plus or minuses for the single people in the room, and you end up roughly actually around 12 to 15,000. That'll preach itself. There's this moment where they're all hungry, and they're nagging the disciples who are Jesus' dudes, and they're like, hey man, is your guy gonna feed us? I didn't know it was one of those conferences where there wasn't food. Where's the Chick-fil-A, And they're like, hey Jesus, I think you should tell him to go home. And Jesus is I ain't done preaching yet. He said, go and find what food's out there. And I'm like, okay. And so they go out there and they're like, hey, there's this kid, a 6-year-old who's here. And he brought with him his lunchbox, and it's got 3 bread and 2 fish or something like that. And Jesus is all right, cool. So we're going to have McChickens and McFillets and whatever the fish one is. I always forget. Filet of fish. There you go. McDonald's filet of fish. And then he does this thing where he wholly slices it, and it just keeps going. So out of the 5, you just get massive amounts of food. They had leftovers. That was the miracle. He just fed all these people, and then he says immediately. And I'll tell you to circle it because you're going to see that word again a couple more times in this passage. But he sends his disciples. He's all right, you guys, get on the boat, get out in the middle of the lake, and I'll catch up with you later. First of all, that's just you just trust Jesus. Be you're going to find it. We're on the boat. You can bonfire. How are you going to get our attention? And then Jesus does something that Elijah last week did not do. Remember I mentioned Elijah suffered some intense anxiety because potentially he did not take the time to rest. And here's Jesus going, and he's going to go up to the mountain. He's going to pray. He's resting. He's resetting. He's saying, I just did a great thing, a mighty thing of God, a mighty work of God. And he also is God. And even God takes time to rest and reset. So we're going to keep going here. Oh, I forgot one thing. Sorry. The boats. This part of the notes. The NIV puts it in tender language where it's it was tossed by the wind. It was buffeted by waves. No, they were in the middle of a storm. Okay, we're talking intense winds are smashing up against it. You got waves rocking this thing. So now the disciples are without Jesus, trying to figure out how they're going to meet back up with him later. They're in the middle of the Sea of Galilee, which is 8 miles wide. And now it's getting darker and darker and darker. And on top of that, of course, because it's the disciples, there's a storm. Awesome. All right. Verse 25. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, and cried out in fear.
Fear. Keyword fear.
Thank you, keyword. So, when it says before dawn, what it actually means is, so Roman tradition was you broke up the night and the day into watches. And they were 3-hour periods. So other translations tell us it's the 4th watch of the night. It's between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. I don't know how many of y'all were with me at the lock-in. Between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. running on no sleep, you go pretty crazy. You're definitely certain. You're like, I'm seeing things. I can hear colors. Like, you are tripping out. And so when it says, hey, it's a ghost coming at us, what the text is trying to tell us in the original Greek, the word that's used there, is not an apparition like we think, woo, but more like, hey, the disciples might have been like tripping. Like, it wasn't their food. What was in that fish and loaves they ate? They've been awake for too long. Like, they are potentially hallucinating. They have no idea what's going on. So now it's 3 a.m., there's a massive storm, and Jesus is walking across the water, and they're like, is that him? I don't really know. He's just kind of coming. I'm tripping out, man. I don't know if it's real. Verse 27, but Jesus immediately said to them, take courage. It is I. Oh, circle that immediately. There's another one. Take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid. Lord, if it's you, Peter replied, tell me to come to you on the water. Come, he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. So this is the second immediately in the passage. There's just something about these immediatelys in here. We're like, in this Bible, and this is my personal. I love this one. Was a gift from my grandpa, not one of his, but it was a Christmas gift that I asked for one year. And I've circled every time in this passage. I had already circled every time immediately popped up, because there's something about the immediacy that Jesus has in this passage, and it's an encouragement to us because there is an immediacy to Jesus. Even if it doesn't feel like it's on our time, it's in His time, and we can trust Him in His time. But he instantly calls up to his disciples. He's like, hey, have courage, man. Don't be afraid. And notice that Jesus telling them to take courage inspires Peter to have courage. I drew a circle there where he said, take courage, and I drew an arrow to where Peter gets out the boat. Because it was Jesus' words that could encourage Peter to get out of the boat. So here's one of the things I want you to learn about courage as we talk about fear, is that courage found in Jesus motivates us to walk where before we thought impossible. Courage found in Jesus motivates us to walk where before we thought impossible. Now, I'm not talking like you're going to go to a lakeside and you're like, all right, Jesus, I'm going to walk on the water. I don't know if that will work again. I'm not going to lie to you. You try it, let me know how it goes, all right? Mythbusters tried it once, I don't know. But I do think there are situations in our life, there are circumstances, whether it's a college, a group of people, a family situation, where you're like, I don't know if I can actually walk in and show them the grace of Jesus. I don't know if I can go in and tell those people about how He loves them. I don't know if with my family always fighting, if I can go in and be the peacemaker. It's too much. And in our fear, we freeze and we shut down. We're like, I know I'm thinking I'm supposed to go there, but I don't know. I don't know. And so Jesus calls Peter, and Peter says, hey man, if it's you, I want to get on the water. He gets out and he walks, and I wish it was that easy. I wish that was the end of the story, right? Where it's like, all right, all you got to do in that impossible situation is just follow Jesus. And you're just going to walk. Unfortunately, that's not the end of the story. Because faith has to have a focus point. Watch what happens with Peter. Verse 30. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and began to sink, cried out, Lord, save me! Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand. There it is, third time. Circle. Immediately. Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You of little faith, he said. Why did you doubt? When they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. Your faith and your fear are both determined by your focus. Your faith and fear are both determined by your focus. It says when he saw the wind. So Peter's eyes are on Jesus, and he's walking across the water. First of all, like the disciples back on the boat, man, okay, you're already thinking you're tripping out seeing Jesus on the water. There's a storm, it's 3:30 in the morning, and now Peter just got out of the boat. I can already hear the man overboard, man, it's crazy Peter again. There he goes. First he says that thing on the mountain, now he's walking on water. Look at that, right? But he's walking because his eyes are on Jesus, and then it says he saw the wind. He saw the storms. How often do we feel like we're walking our lives out okay? We're like, I believe in Jesus, I'm going to church, I'm serving, I'm reading my Bible, I'm praying, I'm doing okay. I feel at peace. I feel confident. Until that anxiety attack hits. Until those parents start arguing again. Until that friend group starts gossiping again. And then all of a sudden our focus shifts to, they think this about me. I don't know if I'm going to fit in there. And your standard drops from Jesus, your focus drops from Jesus to what man thinks. what people think. God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So if you're searching for approval and you're trying to find it in man, let me tell you, man's approval changes. Yesterday they liked your post. Today they didn't like it. And tomorrow they left hate speech. All because what? Their feelings? Because their feelings changed. Because somebody said something in an ear that's a lie. But Jesus says, hey, if I see God and Jesus, they look at you and they're like, if you have accepted me, here is my righteousness. And God looks at you and goes, then you are a child of mine. Yesterday, today, and forever. Your focus needs to be on Jesus. That's where hope is found. Here's another thing I'll point out. Little faith is still some faith. Little faith is still some faith. I just love that where Jesus looks at him and is like, Peter, you have little faith. But notice who had it. Not the disciples in the boat. Jesus never even acknowledges them. But Peter, little faith is still some faith. And yes, you may fall. And immediately, Jesus got him. Pulls him out of the water. And then encourages him. And Peter's still going to mess up. He's still going to lop off the dude's ear. He's going to deny Jesus 3 times. And yet it's Peter, whom Jesus shares some incredible encouragements with. It's Peter who confesses the gospel to him and says, you are the Christ. And that's what Jesus looks at him and says, and it's upon that word that my church will be built. It's upon this rock that the kingdom will come. And Peter goes on to lead one of the first churches in the first century. But he's still having us like this, man. Man, Paul calls him out later. I'm getting into the history of Peter. You don't even need that. Little faith is still some faith. For some of you today, just start with little faith. Quit trying to do the big thing. God will bless with big when you can handle the small. Okay. Notice that the disciples recognize and worship Jesus, recognize him as the Son of God once they get back into the boat. I don't know if it's because Peter walked on water. I don't know if it's because the wind ceased. One of the study Bibles that I was looking at mentions this because, it once again proved that he was the God of the oceans and the wind and nature and stuff like that. But because of that little faith, that moment of little faith, even Peter's getting out of the boat, somebody began to recognize Jesus as the Son of God. For some of you, the way you handle and focus in your fearful situations is going to point somebody else to Jesus. So I want to ask who you are in this account. Are you Peter or are you the disciples? We're all one or the other. We're all in a boat. We all got situations and stuff and people and fear, and it's rocking back and forth. Sometimes it's a cruise line, and sometimes you're in the middle of the thickest storm. I'm going to use that nature kind of analogy again like I did last week, where I wonder if those waves slapping up against the boat, the wind coming down and trying to crush the masts, if that's not symbolism of what our anxiety sometimes feels like to us. What fear is, I don't want to row anymore. The storm just gets worse out here. Why would I keep rowing? Are you Peter or are you the disciples? Because here's what I love about Peter. I'll get there in a second. Situations, you guys, all the 10 situations, there are 2 things I think you can respond. Number 1, you can stay in the boat like the disciples. You can stay in the boat, you can be filled with fear. And what good does that actually do anybody? Other than you create more fear inside yourself. And I don't know if you've noticed, but fear is contagious. When you're scared and then you start dragging somebody into it who can't handle it, now they're starting to get scared. My wife and I were having a conversation the other day. I don't remember what it was about, but it was something intense where I was like, man, I got this decision I got to make. Do I talk to this person? Do I not talk to this person? And she's like, well, but if you say something here, and then me, and then now we're both scared. Fear impacts more than just you. The second thing is you can be like Peter. Lord, if this is you, call me out on the water. Here's what in this translation, and it's not that much different. I just think the language is stronger. He says, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. Remember how week 1 we talked about trust. And then week 2, we talked about being in the presence. Here's Peter, 3:30 in the morning. He's probably had 2 Red Bulls already. He's definitely hearing colors. And he's looking out going, I think that's Jesus. And he hears some words that says, take courage, it is I. And that it is I piece actually in the original language was I am, which was the Hebrew, the Old Testament name of God. And so for Peter, who's grown up in this tradition, he's like, holy snot, this is it. And Peter loved, Jesus loves Peter too. Peter loved Jesus so much that he's like, Lord, Master, that whom I trust, if it is you, command me. Don't just tell me, because you just tell me I ain't going to do it. Command me to come out on the water. Because that's Peter's Jesus. That's who he's searching for. He says, I want to be in your presence. And if you're out there, tell me to come. And Jesus goes, all right, come on. Peter locks eyes and he goes, here I go, boys. Steps over the side of that boat. And all of a sudden he's walking on water. To be with his Jesus at 3:45 a.m. with storms surrounding the boat, with it rocking back and forth, with 11 other dudes tripping out. Peter goes to be with his Jesus. And when his doubt creeps in, because we're all going to have doubts and it creeps in, why did you doubt? I got you. And upon this rock, let's go be with Jesus. Let's find our focus. It's because of his focus on Jesus that Peter walked on the water as if it were solid. You want to walk through your storms full of confidence? You want to walk on it like it's a firm foundation? It takes eyes on Jesus. Scrolling through your phone every night, self-medicating, hanging out with friends to avoid the stuff that's going on at home, the things we look at on our devices. You might feel confident steady in the moment until you wake up with the anxiety the next morning. Till the trauma you've literally created for yourself begins to swirl in the storm. That stuff only holds you for this long. Jesus holds you for an eternity. He promises that. Focus on Jesus. That's it. That's all I've got. In the middle of your fear, you can either focus on your stuff and your junk, or you can focus on Jesus. Because he will allow the waters to become firm. The band's going to go ahead and come back up here. We're going to sing one more song. And last week, I know we tried this, and I'm encouraged by those who came forward. I know it's low. But this is open for prayer. Guys, that's one of the ways that we respond to God, is we then meet him and have a conversation. And we pray. If you're like, well, how do I focus on Jesus? I'm telling you right now, it's prayer. It's the scripture. It's community. And then it's bringing your stuff out into the light. For some of you tonight, you just need to refocus. You were walking, and stuff comes up. It happens. For some others of you in here, this is your invitation. Don't leave here tonight without meeting and experiencing and focusing on Jesus for the first time. He came and died on the cross. He took all your sins, all your doubts, all your fears, all your worries, and he paid it so that you could have a relationship with him and with God. And he's just asking. He just says, hey, will you just lock eyes with me? Come on. Walk out on the water. Yeah, you're going to fall. And I'll pick you back up. At least he promises to pick back up. Some of our friends won't. Parents don't. He will. And if that's you tonight, do not leave this place without grabbing an adult and talking about what it looks like to walk in a relationship with Jesus. I promise that's the best decision you'll ever make in your life. I'm going to pray, and then the front will be open. If you need prayer, grab an adult. We'll pray over you. Grab me. I'll pray over you. Grab a friend. Well, it's like, let's take this time to respond. Dear Lord, thank you so much for today. Thank you for your word. Thank you for the gospel. Thank you that we can just focus on you, and despite the stuff that swirls around us, that we can walk steady through it. Thank you that when we fall, you'll be there to catch us. I thank you for your love. And I pray tonight that the students in this room would begin to learn what it looks like to walk in faith instead of fear, and that they would use faith to fight fear and not have doubts that feed it. And when they do have doubts, that they would surrender them to you, and they talk to somebody, and they begin to walk even stronger. That they just start with little faith, God, because little faith is some faith. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.